Okay, great. Hi, so we are live. I'm Karen. I look, can you hear? How's the sound?
I can hear you, but
Hmm. I don't see the thing yet. Let me try that. All right. Oh, I'm looking up here. I don't think that should do anything for me. It's weird because I don't see the picture here on the computer. That doesn't mean anything though, because the computer does whatever it wants to do. Oh, where's the picture? I'm everywhere. Okay. Oh, you can't hear me. Oh, so basically I've just been talking and it's just it's cool. It's cool. So welcome to Show and Tell. I'm Karen, your host. And today, like Show and Tell is all about anything that is interesting and that your guests are passionate about. And ooh, I'm gonna turn my sound on down here. Today, I'm really excited because our guest today is Kirk German, and he is here to talk to us about World's Fairs and time capsules. Kirk, let the people know who you are.
I'm Kirk. I'm a Gemini. I'm a teacher. I am a writer. I am a sometimes performer. I am an aspiring interdisciplinary creative, and I'm a guy who really has a lot of feelings and thoughts about World's Fairs.
As we all should. So I am really excited because I've heard you talk about World's Fairs before. You did your thesis on them, and I've got to be a part of it.
Yes, you did.
So
You're a tremendous contributor to it.
yes. I mean, if you want to get right down to it, I did most of the work, so it's fine.
Yeah.
So that degree should be mine if we really get down to it. No. I'm
It's
just
upstairs. I'll pass it over to you.
just can you put it just like share screen it? I know, just pass it to me through the chat. It's gonna be great.
You got it. I'll cross my
So
name out.
so all right. So what should we know? Let's start off. What should we know? Because there's a lot to cover. I want to make sure we get through everything.
Yeah, probably we should define World's Fairs just because they're not as familiar as once they were to people, I think.
Mhm.
Um, even though they were very, very common. And even though they do still happen, they're different now than they used to be, but they are still happening. There's actually supposed to be one in Dubai in 2020.
Oh,
Shockingly, it was postponed.
why? That's
Yeah.
crazy.
So
But so when they postponed it, did they postpone it for a year? Did they postpone it for like two? Like, what is the?
I've I've heard both 2021, which we're already in, and 2022
Yeah.
as dates.
All
And it's
right.
interesting because similar things are happening with the Olympics, right? And the World's Fair and the Olympics actually have a lot of sort of overlaps in their ethos and in
Oh,
some of the intentions behind them. So World's Fair, sometimes called an international exposition, it's sort of this grand scale, almost always temporary, almost always just 1 year at the most, or even just a season, like April to September event held in a specific host city somewhere in the world, open in theory to the general public for an admission. Although, of course, there have been communities who have not been included or felt welcome
mhm.
historically, especially the further back you go in those fairs. But it's a place where different countries and different industries gather to display new inventions, to share things like food, visual art, live performance from different cultures. As time went on with the World's Fairs, eventually there was often a very big carnival as part of the fair. That was often a big attraction with rides. But the Parallel Olympics are the sort of coming together of the different countries to one place for this short period of time, but without necessarily the sporting events, although sometimes there would be sporting events at World's Fairs, but it wasn't, focused on that sort of athletic competition. Almost every fair has a distinct theme. Almost every fair has something notable that it contributed. And if I can I share a quote?
Yes, please.
So my favorite World's Fair scholar is a professor in Montana named Robert Rydell, who said that World's Fairs exerted a formative influence on the way that millions of people thought about themselves and the world in which they live. mirroring not only the ideals, but also the cultural tensions of their times.
Now I have a question.
Yeah.
How does one go about choosing where to have the World's Fair? Like I know, say for the Olympics, it's this big choosing event, and then not necessarily always the best for the place that is chosen. It doesn't always actually help them financially. So is that similar with World's Fairs?
Very similar. Just to address the second part of what you said,
Mm-hmm.
more World's Fairs, especially more modern ones, so getting into the 20th century, more World's Fairs have lost money than made money.
Mm-hmm.
And many World's Fairs have had negative impacts on local communities. Displacement has been a part of the history of World's Fairs. They're complicated. World's Fairs are really, really complicated. It's one of the reasons I think I'm drawn to them is because they are in so many ways just contradictory, because there's often this aspirational quality. There are sometimes progress is happening at the fairs, but at the same time, they are reflections of systems of power and privilege that are getting replicated and reinforced in really unhealthy and negative ways. But yes, as of 1928, I think is the year, it's based in Paris, of course, the Bureau
BIE.
International, yes, the Bureau of International Expositions has been the group officially designating something a World's Fair. People would put bids in, they would acknowledge it. Here's the thing, they also retroactively went back and said, okay, these things in the past were official expositions and these ones weren't.
That's very French. That is very, very French.
Well, it's supposed to be international, but yes, they're a little bit selective about it. So if you look at the official list from BIE of what have been international expositions, there's only about 50 of them. But if you actually look at sort of the broad scope of things that have potential claim to be World's Fairs, some of which I think are, it's hundreds of them, going all the way back to what is really considered the first one, which was the Crystal Palace in London in 1851, which was a sort of pet project of Prince Albert. Queen Victoria loved him and wanted to give him something to do. So he had this big glass building built in different countries, and different industries came and all displayed in this one enormous building. So
there were no puzzles she could have given him instead. She was like, no, let me give you a World Expo instead. Here you go. So here's a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. Or
I mean, when you're Queen Victoria,
go big or go home. So
exactly. She really loved Albert, I guess, is what we learned from this. I mean, so many things are named after him.
He's in a can. Sorry.
Can. I believe there is a piercing that is named after him. That is of a personal nature. I don't know if Queen Victoria gave him that gift.
I would like to know if anyone is like really interested in that, where that came from, and if you would like to figure that out and then come on and tell us about it. Totally on board. Just definitely, totally on board. Yes. Thank you. Jenna is currently Googling it. Thank you. That is what a good producer does. All right. So
that has not been part of my research, so I couldn't tell you. So the Bureau is the official body for it, but kind of there's various times that pretty much anyone has said, any city is, if they've raised the money to make it happen, have said, okay, it's a World's Fair. And actually in the small town of Tunbridge, Vermont, where one of my best friends is originally from, well, he's from Peru, but also Tunbridge, but they have an annual event called the Tunbridge World's Fair, which is basically just a county fair with, pie eating contests and judging sheep and stuff, but they've taken that name. But it's interesting, the year, the fair I know the most about and done the most research on was the 1939 fair in New York, which I know we'll get to later, focus on that one. But the same year, there was another fair claiming to be a World's Fair in San Francisco. There was a San Francisco fair happening in 1939. It did not get the official designation, but there was involvement from multiple countries and industries and things like this. So yes, there are official World's Fairs, and there are also other ones that I think match the criteria other than not having the official, acknowledgement or recognition.
So when exactly did the BIE become like the body?
I think it was 1928. It was sometime in the 1920s. They became the official body, and they were the ones going forward who said, okay, this is a World's Fair. And they also went back in the past and said, this is and this isn't.
So just real serious, because I'm really just fascinated by this level of bureaucracy that someone decided needed to happen.
The bureaucracy.
Like who was just like, you know what we need? We need like a bunch of French people to be like, this is real and this is not. Who said that? Thank you, Jenna. So sorry. So Jenna has posted in the quote, legend has it that Queen Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, had a urethra piercing to assist the hang of his genitals within relatively tight trousers. There's also a theory that Albert had Peyronie's disease, where the penis curves, and the piercing might have been an attempt to straighten it. However, none of this has been proven, and we should probably take it out with a pinch of salt. I will not. It is now fact. So there we go. It came from the internet, and the internet does not lie. Oh. Two different websites. There you go. That's like backing it up. So. That's what I was saying.
That. Can the audience hear Jenna? When they talk? No. Okay. All right. It's our exclusive. That's what I thought. Just wanted to make sure. All right. So I guess if it's on two websites, we can take it with 2 pinches of salt. Although don't pitch any salts down on your urethra. I would not recommend. Actually, don't do anything. Just let it flow. That's crazy. Okay. Wow.
All right. Sorry. We are proper people. We are not. So who authorized the BIE?
I don't know.
Oh, so more than likely someone just set up an office and was like, this is it. All right. You have pictures. Are we ready for pictures?
I do. I have pictures. Yeah. Will I see them, or will you just tell me what is?
I will just see them because I can see them on the screen. So I'm in the chats. I'm reading the chats.
Brilliant.
I like that your bar for brilliant is so low. I appreciate it. Obviously, there's probably going to be a little sound first.
So are we looking at 2 postcards right now? Yeah. So we are looking at 2 postcards from 1982 and 1984 from Knoxville and New Orleans. So when I was 4 years old, my family packed up our family station wagon in Austin, Texas, and we took what was, I think, my first road trip to Knoxville, Tennessee to go to the World's Fair.
Wait, that one was 80. Yeah, I guess 82. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So why would you go there first? You had the choice to go to New Orleans.
Well, because New Orleans was 2 years later. 2 years later, in 1984, we did the exact same thing. It was a shorter trip. By then I was 6, right? Yeah, 1984, I was 6. We packed up and we went to the World's Fair in New Orleans. Kaaron, we may have seen each other there.
Probably.
So then 1986 rolls around and I asked my family, hey, we're going to the World's Fair. My dad says, no, there are no more World's Fairs. And in fact, there has not been a World's Fair on American soil since the one in New Orleans. That was the last US World's Fair.
Well, I mean, we really shut it down. So I get it.
Yeah, Mike was dropped by New Orleans. What's funny is I remember both those fairs, but I can't remember what I remember from what. They're all a jumble in my mind, but they are some of my earliest memories, some of my formative memories. And what I remember about them, and I can share some specific things I remember about those fairs, but it was the place where I first got a sense of a world beyond my own. Because there were these pavilions to the different countries, because there were all these interesting, bizarre inventions and just the scale of it. I hadn't really been to any amusement parks or theme parks at that point. And those experiences really stuck with me. And I think they stuck with other people as well. I feel like it stuck with you, right? I was around my age when that New Orleans one happened.
Yeah, let's just say I was close to your age. Let's go with that. Anyway, so we don't need to get into specifics. Numbers are crazy. I do remember that everything that at that time was the World's Fair. Just pelicans all over the place. And it felt, I don't think Candace wants us to remember the human car wash.
Yes, Candace, when I met Candace, she reminded me about it and it all came back to me, the kid wash. It was called the kid wash. And kids would be in their swimsuits and walk through and have like the equivalent of a car wash. That is, I think, many people of, people who were kids at the time, that is the thing that they remember the most.
It was like magic. Like I don't even remember like all the details. All I remember, like I made a post about it of just really just remembering flashes of things, and all of the flashes are warm and like beautiful memories of this thing that happened. And I don't think I processed at the time that how rare it was, or the fact that everywhere does not get a World's Fair, and this is not a thing that happens all the time. It's like, oh, clearly this is what you just do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I can't imagine what it was like to be living in a city where that was happening. Just because, the marketing around, the one that, again, that I've researched most, 1939, the marketing of it was so intense all around the country. Multiple covers of Life magazine. The New Yorker for a year had a whole section just about what was happening at the fair. It was everywhere, newsreels everywhere. So I can imagine if you're in the place where it's happening, just that sense of excitement that's building up for it.
Well, my neighbor and I went to high school together, Shelly, and she reminded me that she somewhere in her apartment, she has like Seymour de Fair actual like memorabilia.
He's the next image too.
Oh, good. Can we go to Seymour? Awesome. I have like 3 pictures of everything. There's Seymour. So all his black and white.
Suddenly Seymour.
And standing beside you, and you're slightly creeped out. So yes, so Candace would like to point out that New Orleans is a place that has big events on the regular. At least we do, though. Honestly, we get out for parades. We got out of school for parades, and apparently that's not a thing people do. I didn't know that either until I moved away.
About weeks and weeks of parades leading up to a period of deprivation.
I don't really understand why people don't do this regularly. So here's Seymour, and Seymour was literally all over New Orleans at that year, everywhere. Your T-shirts, like little stuffed toys, everywhere. So
I have a button back home. I know like every like pamphlet or map had him on there. He was like, they were sort of marketing him as the mascot. He was the Mickey Mouse of the fair.
Yes, which I guess now once again, a thing I never thought about. There's probably like a bunch of people in like nasty costume character running around instead of like, oh, there's just one Seymour and everybody's just sees Seymour. Probably not. So did not occur to me. The things you learn so many years later or think about.
I would love to do an oral history of that fair at some point and like really get in depth of what people remember, but also like find out about who was behind it, find one of the people who played Seymour, find out what happened to those costumes. Where did they end up?
Burned. They were probably burned.
They were probably burned. Yeah.
Right.
I would have been scared of him probably. Well, I guess by the time I was that age, maybe not. When I was really little, one of my major fears was mascots.
Oh.
Seeing so did they have Showbiz Pizza in New Orleans?
Yes.
Or Chuck E. Cheese? So you had Showbiz.
We had Showbiz. I had to Showbiz. Yeah, we did have Showbiz because of the bear playing. Yes.
Billy Bob Bear. I remember going to Showbiz to pick up my older brother from a birthday party with my parents, and that bear was there, and I lost it. And for a long time, anything like that, any human-sized suit, really, really freaked me out.
Oh, wow.
The animal costume. So if I had met Seymour, maybe by the time I was 6, it was okay. But I remember being younger, that was a big fear of mine. Other fun fact about fears of mine, growing up, I was deathly afraid of the duck-billed platypus.
Oh.
In my mind, I had this coloring book where the duck-billed platypus was next to a picture of a gorilla, and I knew how big a gorilla was. And I didn't understand that they weren't, that the scale was different. So I thought duck-billed platypi were 5.5 feet long. But when I stopped being afraid of the duck-billed platypus was when I went to the Australian Pavilion.
Ah!
Those two, see, this had a point.
Paint around.
It was probably Knoxville. It may have been New Orleans, but going to the Pavilion, and my dad said, this is a duck-billed platypus. They had a diorama of all the marsupials and monotremes of Australia in this little indoor glade. And it was so cute and little, and I wasn't scared of it anymore.
I mean, I think that I became less afraid when I started watching Phineas and Ferb, but that's a completely different story. So where are we going next? Where are we going next?
Are we going next? Well, so you and I were talking before about how there are, remnants of the World's Fair all over the world from the different ones that have happened. Some people know this, some people don't. I would say the most famous, by far, building that is from a World's Fair that was meant to be temporary. It was meant to be a temporary building, was the Eiffel Tower. So I think I have one of the Exposition Universelle.
There it is.
Was it 1889? Paris had so many. Paris is one of those cities that had exposition after exposition after exposition.
I wonder why. I wonder what was happening there.
That's probably why they thought they deserved to have the bureau.
Which came first, the bureau or the fair?
Mm-hmm. That is a bon question. So that was meant to be temporary, and yet here it is still with us. The most iconic, reproduced on trinkets and other images, destination building in the world, I would argue. And so its legacy is from the World's Fair. Of course, some things were meant to be more permanent that are also, defining buildings of city skylines. I have next, it should be an image of Eiffel Tower next to the Space Needle in Seattle.
Oh, cool.
So these are just two examples, but really they're all over. There's a big parts of Montreal that still have remnants of the fair that was there in, I think, 1967. My favorite sort of weird postmodern World's Fair building that's still around is the Atomium in Brussels. Have you seen that?
No.
It's a giant, made up of all these spheres that should represent the atom, but they're big enough. Each sphere is like an enormous room. You go through these elevators and escalators to get up into them. It's cool. Really cool. Google it. I mean, I know I should have had an image of it, but yeah, Google the Atomium.
Google it. No, I would.
Did I say 67? 58. That was 58. Brussels was 58. Montreal was 67.
I did a post today on the Middletons, which you introduced me to. And oh god, but the movie itself is part of the National Film Registry, and it's because Electro is in the movie, and Electro apparently was taken and used and put to be seen around California, but then also used in movies. So, and then of course,
who doesn't want a cigarette smoking 7-foot robot that can say 70 words slowly?
I mean, that's what I have that second room for. That's just it's where Electro's going to be living eventually. I know that we're going to get to New York, because that for me is obviously like Corona Park is that is for me like the thing that I keep remembering is that's World's Fair. The World's Fair was like, we're here, we don't feel like cleaning up our mess, so deal. And then they just left. So.
We're gonna get to New York. I do just want to say, for people who are think they might be interested in World's Fairs, number one book I recommend, and Jen and I were talking about this earlier, is Devil in the White City by Eric Larson, which is the 1893, well, half of it is about the 1893 Columbian Exposition in Chicago, which many scholars argue is sort of the definitive American fair. It popularized the Ferris wheel, Wrigley's gum. We have the Pledge of Allegiance because of that fair. So it is, Eric Larson is an amazing writer. In terms of books I've read about the World's Fair, it's the best sort of popular history about a World's Fair. And that is the book, when I reread it, or when I read it for the first time, that reignited my interest in World's Fairs from when I was a kid. I read that book and I thought, I gotta keep learning and absorbing this. I grew hungry for it, but it remains, I think, the best. So I'd recommend that book to anybody. It could be a gateway for you into more World's Fair
gateway drug
and research. But it's that book is great. And I had an image up there of that.
There it is, yeah.
So yeah, and the great thing is you could spend a lifetime learning about different World's Fairs. And when I go some places, like when I went to Portland to see my in-laws, I got a book about the Portland Lewis and Clark exposition. I recently moved to Philadelphia. I live right by Fairmount Park, which is the site of the Centennial exhibition, which, by the way, is the first officially designated by the Bureau American World's Fair. So this is the actual guide to the fair that got republished in 1976, but it's from 1876. And I don't know, do you remember this name, James Dabney McCabe, Kaaron?
It sounds familiar, but once again, I don't remember where I was an hour ago. So.
That's fair. He wrote, I don't either, except that I was definitely home. He wrote a book, because where else do I go? He wrote a book called The Lights and Shadows of New York Life. It was like an 800-page book about everything in New York in the 19th century from a very privileged upper middle class white male lens, but it's still a fascinating book. But we used some of his passages, some of the things he said about, he was one of the first people to write about pushcart vendors.
Yeah.
And he has a whole chapter on sort of outdoor vending in New York. And there is a connection between pushcart vendors and the 1939 World's Fair. We'll get to it if we have a chance. But
we're gonna get to it.
Once you start scratching the surface, there's World's Fair stuff. It's all around us. We just don't always know. And certain invention here in Philly, guess what? My wife and I were taking a walk in Fairmount Park, and we saw this rock with a plaque on it. We walked over to it, and it said, on this site in 1876, the Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition, for the very first time, Alexander Graham Bell displayed the telephone.
Oh, wow.
So I was standing on this walk that I was taking. I was standing where the telephone began, right? Something we all... You
took out your phone and took a picture of it.
I did. That's exactly what I did.
All right, where are we going next? I do want to make sure that we get to time.
So we're going to make sure we're talking about the 1939 World's Fair. I do just want to put in context. New York has had 3 World's Fairs, and the 1939 one is the one that's in the middle of the 3, not directly in the middle, but of the 3, it was the second one. The first one goes back and is, I think, the first United States World's Fair, and that was the Crystal Palace. So stole its name from Prince Albert.
Did they also steal his piercing?
I wonder. Well, you know who wrote a poem about that was Walt Whitman. So it may have been of interest to him. I don't know. So the Crystal Palace of 1853, 1854. Interesting thing about all 3 New York World's Fairs were 2-year fairs. Oh. Which it never happens. But I think New York was able to say, we're going to do this for 2 years. And they did it for the Crystal Palace. They did it in 1939. They did it in 1964. So anyway, the Crystal Palace was also called the Exhibition of the Industry of All Nations, but it was inside one building. There's a lithograph with it, and you can maybe see there's a tower next to it. That tower next to it was called the Ladding Observatory, which when it was built was the tallest structure ever built by European Americans in New York City up to that point. It was 315 feet taller than the Statue of Liberty. It had 3 observatory platforms, and many historians say it was actually the thing that inspired the Eiffel Tower in Paris 30 years later.
Well, I can see that, the structure of it. Though, yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. I won't judge their work from here.
Well, here's the thing. It burned down, as did the Crystal Palace. Both of them burnt down within like 3 to 4 years of the exhibition happening. But everything except for the observatory, everything was inside one big building, and there was a whole area for agriculture and a whole area for like steam powered things. And then there was an area for Italy and an area for Turkey. And it was immense. And as I understand it, the Javits Center is modeled on that original Crystal Palace model in a more modern way, I guess. Probably the thing it's most famous for is that is where Otis exhibited the first elevator with a safety. There'd been elevators before that didn't have, I can't remember what it's called, but like a safety
cord or something.
Yeah. And did this thing where he got up on the platform and then cut the main cord and he stopped after falling like just a foot or so. Wait.
So I know Otis is like the elevator company, but are you talking about original Otis?
Yeah, Mr. Otis.
Oh,
yeah. Wow. That is where, I can't remember his first name.
I think I always thought Otis was just like an acronym for something.
No, he was a dude. Clifford, or I don't know, Mr. Otis.
Mr. Otis.
He was a guy, and that is what made the Otis elevator the elevator, because that moment was such a huge moment. And I think it's interesting to sort of think about, one of the things New York is known for is its skyscrapers. So you can sort of draw this interesting direct line to this moment where Otis had the elevator on display.
Dara wants us to know that she could never test safety that way, but that's because Dara doesn't live her life on the edge like Mr. Otis did. Um, I think it's also fascinating just that we're talking about you said 1853, and Otis is still going strong. So
Right?
as a company, still going strong.
Exactly. You see it everywhere.
Yes.
And we know the name, but we don't know that he was a dude or where it came from. And I think that's an interesting part of the legacy of these World's Fairs too. Sometimes is we don't actually, we don't know the whole history of it, and yet the name is still out there. And in that case, indelibly identified. Name another elevator, Kaaron.
I think actually there's a like miss at the risk of offending Big Otis, I think that there's maybe like
don't mess with Big Otis. They're watching the co-op. Sorry, what?
They don't need no safety elevators over Big Otis. So I think there's a monopoly here. I don't know that I've even ever seen another elevator that wasn't maintained by Otis. So but we should continue on because I'm so desperate to get to this. I have so many thoughts about this time capsule, and it's all because of you.
We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. I just want to mention the New York World's Fair that's in most recent memory and notable for a lot of people. And one I've talked to a fair amount of New Yorkers of a certain age who remember it was 1964, 1965. And that is that had the name, I had to write it down here, Peace Through Understanding Human Achievement on a Shrinking Globe and an Expanding Universe, which is way too long of a motto.
I don't know, I feel like it just rolls off the tongue.
So that happened, of course, in Flushing Meadows, Corona Park, the same location where the 1939 was. We'll get in a moment. There's a lot of traces of 64, most notably, of course, the Unisphere, which is a 140-foot stainless steel model of planet Earth. The largest human-made globe on the globe. You can see the next slide should be the New York State Pavilion, which initially had this beautiful terrazzo tile map of New York State. It got ruined because for a while it became a roller disco later, and it all tipped off, and it just hasn't been maintained. But the exterior structure remains, and of course those high up circular observation decks show up in Men in Black.
Yes.
As the flying saucers. And also in the next image in The Wiz, they filmed, which I know is a musical that you have jumped into not too long ago, Kaaron, as a director.
I directed it last year.
Yeah, it was great. And so the movie The Wiz had some shots there. Other things from this fair has left a pretty big impact. It's a Small World debuted at the 64-65 fair. Disney was involved. Walt Disney was closely involved with the 64-65 fair. It's a Small World was a huge hit. One of the most popular event, rides there, attractions, I guess I should say. It's not quite a ride. And now it is, still one of the most popular rides at all the Disney parks, and is perhaps the most annoying earworm of all time. Walt Disney's ambitions for Epcot Center were really inspired by the World's Fair. I mean, Epcot is a permanent World's Fair, essentially, which also means it doesn't age well. There's a reason World's Fair is a temporary in there. I haven't been to Epcot in a while since I got back interested in World's Fairs, but I kind of like to go back and just sort of do a kind of study of it at some point. Because
the only thing I remember about it is that the ice cream was not great. That's all I remember.
Oh.
But I was like, this is subpar.
Wow.
So, I was too young for alcohol, so I couldn't have that. And yes, I was there with my father and my brother, and I was like, this, it was like a layer of wax or something around it. I was like, this is disgusting. My very distinct palate of French fry eating childhood was like this is disgusting. I will not. So
isn't it? It's so funny the things that we remember, because honestly, my most vivid memory to go back to the World's Fair we went to, and I don't know if it was New Orleans or if it was Knoxville, but I remember meeting a robot who was a giant bottle of ketchup, and he went around with these little arms, and he would give kids Heinz pickle pins. Heinz pickle pins, by the way, I think the most replicated souvenir across the World's Fairs, because Heinz always had a stake in every World's Fair, going back to maybe to Philadelphia, maybe to the Centennial. But definitely by the time of Chicago, and always Heinz. There's billions of these Heinz. They're shaped like a little pickle, like the Heinz model. And this ketchup bottle was this moving ketchup bottle who came and gave me a pin.
It's interesting because Heinz would have been German, and I'm assuming it's probably also like a thing to be like, hey, we're cool. Don't yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder if Heinz. I don't know much about Heinz itself. I do know Germany is one of the, only countries who was disinvited from the 1939 World's Fair.
I wonder why. What was
Yeah, can't imagine what was going on geopolitically that may have. Really quickly, 64-65 fair with the Unisphere there. A couple other notable things about it. It was, for many Americans who came to it, it was their first glimpse of personal computers and the first time to interact with personal computers. IBM had a pavilion there, and they had basically world's first and most basic search engine. You would go to this keyboard and you would type in a date, any date that the New York Times had been in production, and on this like screen in front of the whole room, the headline from the New York Times of that date would appear up on the screen.
Wait. No. It would have been 39. Never mind. I was because I did a deep dive with the Marvel movies last year, and in
Iron Man, right?
No, Iron Man, yes, but also Captain America. He goes to the World's Fair. They go to the World's Fair, and I believe it would have been a 39.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I haven't seen, my Marvel viewing has been limited to Black Panther and Into the Spider-Verse.
We're gonna have a long talk about our friendship. Let's continue though.
I think maybe my favorite thing that most people know is from the World's Fair, and a lot of people love it, is the Panorama of New York that's there in the Queen's Museum, which was originally conceived as a ride in which you would ride on this like fake helicopter and go all the way around and see this panorama. But that panorama is still, I think, such a cool thing that's there in the middle of this contemporary art museum.
That's the thing I sent you. That's the picture that I sent you last year when I was doing that deep dive, and I'm pretty sure it's probably still in my text. I'm gonna look for it.
You also sent me something from a Twilight Zone episip.
I sent you. Oh, I did. That was
a Twilight Zone episode you shared that I marked and haven't gotten to view yet.
So let's see if you can kind of. I'm really not great with this, but you can kind of sort of see. It's Tony Stark in front of. You can't see anything. Let's just assume that you can see it.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's isn't it gorgeous? It's Tony Stark standing in front of like that diorama of everything, and it's just sitting on the side in his office.
That's awesome.
It's Iron Man. It would have been, I think, the last one because he's no longer in that office. So, yeah, I doubled up the nerd in here. There we go.
That's great. Okay, I promise to watch those. I will watch the Iron Mans, yes, and Captain's America. Plurals are hard. I watched Agent Carter for what it's worth. I love that show.
It's a great show.
That show is so good.
So, but we will get back because I can go deep here. We can go. This could be a whole side. Yes, we're not going to do it. We're not doing it.
Okay. I did just watch Wonderstruck recently, which has sort of the culminating scene is in the panorama at the Queen's Museum. But that's based on a Brian Selznick book. Brian Selznick, who did Hugo. It's a charming little film, that Wonderstruck. And it was cool to see now that I'm in Philly, and of course I haven't been in any museums in almost a year anywhere. Anyway, it was nice to sort of get that little trip to both the Queen's Museum and see the panorama, and also to go to the AMNH. Last thing I want to say about this fair, it's if you talk to people who went to the 64-65 fair, or at least anecdotally in my experience, the number one thing people talk about when I've asked them about it are the Belgian waffles.
Really?
Yes. The 1964-65 fair introduced, apparently, Belgian waffles to America, and they were by far the biggest selling food item at the 64-65 fair. People were going crazy for the Belgian waffles.
Okay. I mean, they're good. I get it.
They are good. But, I have one of my faculty mentors in grad school had gone, and I said, "Oh, tell me about it. I want to dig deep into, the experience of the World's Fair meant as a reflection of the culture at the time." And she said, "Oh, the waffles were so good." She was like 7 or something, so that's that she remembers some waffles.
Hey, where we go next? Where we go?
So I think, and by the way, at any point, if anyone is sharing in the chat about any World's Fair memories, I would love to hear them. So.
I'm keeping an eye out for them.
Okay, great.
All right.
So the fair I have spent sort of the most time with researched, and of course you collaborated on project related to it. When was that? 3 years ago, 4 years ago, a while ago now, was 1939. So the grounds of what eventually became Corona Park, Flushing Meadows Corona Park, were originally, before the 1930s, the biggest site for waste and refuse collection in all of New York City, the Corona Ash Heap, memorialized in The Great Gatsby as the Valley of Ashes. And when New York sort of got the bid and became the official site, that's the only New York fair that was an official fair, by the way.
Oh.
Crystal Palace wasn't designated official retroactively, and 64-65 was not given that status as an official fair by the Bureau either. So only 39-40, I should call it. Only 39-40 got official designation. So there was this sort of massive project to turn this ash dump into what would be the fairgrounds. And then the promise that was made to the charming and lovely Parks Commissioner, Mr. Robert Moses, was that then it could be, his park that he wanted to make the Versailles of New York. And he later was, when he became the, power broker, the all-consuming, powerful, terrible person that he was the president later of the 64-65 fair, but he was definitely instrumental in the 39 fair as well. Most books that you read about 39 fair, the person that comes up again and again is someone named Grover Whalen, who, speaking of parades, he was the guy who gave a ticker tape parade whenever he could. When Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic, any excuse to throw a ticker tape parade, Grover Whalen was the man who made that happen. He was the president of the 39 fair, and he's kind of an interesting figure. What was that?
I love Grover already just for that. He's like, I woke up this morning, ticker tape parade, just do it.
He had a very florid mustache, and he would walk around every day. He'd walk around the fair and check on everybody and check on things. But in 1939, they lost so much money that they fired him as president and put this banker in charge as president in 1940.
Oh, it's very New York.
I know. So New York. So the iconic buildings, and I think there's one more image before we go to maybe to the slideshow, but the iconic buildings of the World's Fair are the Trilon and the Perisphere, which I have a little salt and pepper shaker of here. So this is really show and tell now, right? Here's the Perisphere. Here is the Trilon. You can see there's an image. I can't remember which one's the dismantling and which one is the creation, but sort of side-by-side photos that you have up there of the two iconic buildings, which eventually were dismantled into scrap and reused in munition factories during World War II. But the Trilon and Perisphere were everywhere. And I think I just have a bunch of images you can cycle through here of where the Trilon and Perisphere showed up. But it was everywhere. I have playing cards with it. I mean, there were hats, there were fabrics, anything with the World's Fair. Those are the two iconic things. And the Perisphere sat where the Unisphere does today. The sort of, the circle right in the center of where all the paths converge in the park. So, the 1939 fair was called the World of Tomorrow.
You've told me about, in research, you've told me about the 39 World's Fair. And I think the things that stood out to me is, I made the joke before about New York always being New York, but how very, the things that were done for the city to allow this thing to happen. Like you talked about the push carts, but the push that LaGuardia made just in general to make this thing happen, and how far, how little the citizens of this, especially the not so well-heeled citizens, were taken into account for this World's Fair.
Yeah. So, yeah. And even though, I mean, one of the most problematic things about World's Fairs really up until the 19-teens is that there would often be human zoos. There would be people on display, villages and whatever that super problematic, right? By the time we get to the 1930s, that's not happening anymore. And yet behind the scenes, the structural racism is everywhere. There were Black families who lived close to, the ash place, who just got eviction notices that their buildings were coming down. There were unfair hiring practices in the park, not surprisingly, right? So there's just as much problematic history as there is this sort of, again, aspirational, because this fair was all about the future. And plenty of other previous fairs had had elements that were about like looking forward, looking to the future. But this was the first one that was ever explicitly like, this is our central theme, which kind of makes sense coming out of the Great Depression, this idea of like this utopian vision of what the future could be. But baked into it is the other really problematic thing, which is it is all about consumer capitalism. Like this fair is kind of the first one where every American corporation has a pavilion, and there's just a real push towards like being a good patriotic American is about buying products with a big focus on the car and in the things related to what became by the 1950s very stereotypical ideas of an ideal sort of suburban house. A lot of the rides were sort of promoting the suburbs and these sort of decentralized sort of cityscape systems defined by highways and segregation being not explicitly said but implicit within that. So super duper problematic stuff going on. And yet this fair has been, there are some scholars who say in terms of modern fairs like post World War I fairs, this is sort of the standard by which other fairs are measured. And it is, it's shaped so much of the pop cultural and sort of mainstream sci-fi imagery about what the future is going to look like was influenced by the aesthetic of this fair. The big thing about it was the very first television broadcast ever happened at the 1939 World's Fair. Franklin Delano Roosevelt gave the opening speech, and it was broadcast. Now that said, it was broadcast into 200 television sets that were in New York City, so it wasn't like a national.
It was huge.
But it was the start of something, and there was a whole one of the buildings was a place where you could go and see someone on your companion who was with you could go into this other room and you would see them on the television screen, which blew people's minds because people were used to film, of course, but they knew that film was this thing that was recorded and then you watched it later. But seeing a live video screen feed was kind of a remarkable thing.
I remember you talking about this before, we've had conversation about it, and what you say about this being the message being for the future, not necessarily that it is so much about what our future has become, in terms of capitalism, money, buy, and that on one hand it's kind of funny, but at the other hand it's it's kind of scary that this is where it started. You can see the place where you could have gone one way, but you decided to go another. And it's exciting. It's interesting. Yeah.
And it's, it was intentional because the 1930s were a moment when we could have become a more socialist, truly socialist, not communist, but truly socialist country. Because people were realizing capitalism wasn't working. The Great Depression was a sign of that. So this fair in a lot of ways was a big propaganda scheme to say, no, capitalism is the way forward. And it's fascinating. We can't say the fair is entirely to credit for that, right? But it had a big impact on it. And you look at something it is not subtle in the Middletons.
Ooh. So I for those who follow us on the Instagrams, I did post about the Middletons today, and I made jokes about it being about Babs and her choice between Jim and Nicholas, but it's really also a choice between good old-fashioned American capitalist patriotism and this weird European communism. And of course Babs makes the right choice.
She picks good old Jim from back home.
Good Lord, Jim had nothing going for him. But yes, she did. She picked Jim. So.
No, they intentionally found the blandest, whitest actors that they possibly could to create that Middleton family.
I feel like they took a jar, a big jar, milk, and was just yes, okay, great. So Jim looks like this. All right, great, good. So.
It's funny that you mentioned milk because who else became famous at the 1939 fair was Elsie the Cow.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this was her big moment. She was already an icon, but that is the first time they picked apparently a very flirtatious cow to be the official Elsie. And she was, after Futurama, which was a General Motors ride that apparently blew people's minds. After Futurama, Elsie was the biggest attraction at the 1939 World's Fair. People lined up to see a cow.
Oh my God, Janice, there's the cow, there's the TV. It's amazing. You got to see this World's Fair. Oh, the cow.
Oh, Gladys, are you sure? It's kind of expensive. It's 75 cents.
I would have gone to the push cart, but they're gone. So
Parts were gone. So yeah, so this is, as Kaaron knows, a big part of sort of what my thesis explored was how the World's Fair was sort of held up as this, transformative event that was going to get America out of the Depression. It's going to put New York City, make it the center of culture again. It's going to bring international people from all over into one place and celebrate peace and harmony. And they wouldn't have used the word that I can't think of right now.
Apparently neither will you.
Multiculturalism. They wouldn't have used the word multiculturalism at that point, but that was sort of the idea behind it. And yet, what was happening? I mean, it was very, very geared towards suburban white families, right? As the Middleton video shows. But also, it had a detrimental effect on those, the African American residents of Queens who were in the Flushing area. But also a tremendously detrimental effect on something that was iconically New York, which were the predominantly Jewish and Italian run push carts of the Lower East Side and Little Italy that were the foundation of that economy. But they used the World's Fair as an excuse to clean up the streets, do slum clearance, basically limit all of the peddler licenses, create these indoor places like what was until recently Essex Market, where people did indoor vending, but there were not enough spaces. And also it cost more money than it would to rent a push cart. So it had a tremendously, negative impact on what many of us now consider the iconic, New York immigrant neighborhood, at least Jewish immigrant neighborhood of the Lower East Side, which don't have time to get into that. I was a lead educator of the Tenement Museum for 5+ years. So I have a lot of thoughts about, that neighborhood and what it's become in sort of the American imagination, et cetera. Yeah. But that was a story that was not being told for so long about the World's Fair. And no wonder, because the marketing for this was so intense. I mean, it was, like I said, it was everywhere. You couldn't, if you paid attention to any media in the late 1930s through 1940, you couldn't avoid the World's Fair. And I found out much later, the reason my dad wanted to take me and my brother to Knoxville and to New Orleans is because when he was a little kid in Houston, a little boy, he had some neighbors who went to the World's Fair, and he was so jealous because it was all he could think about, all he knew about. And of course, his parents couldn't afford to go. But it was to him this like magical thing. And he was sort of like reclaiming that moment by taking his sons there.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
All right. We have 7 minutes.
So it's time capsule time, right?
Yay! Oh, good.
Okay. So probably of all the things at the World's Fair 1939 that I have thought about and talked about, the thing I've spent the most time thinking about and talking about is the time capsule. Okay, so if you were at the Queens Museum, or you're looking at the Pavilion, or at the Unisphere, or you're at a Mets game, or even U.S. Open, general you, if you're in that area, take a moment and take a walk, if it's a nice day, over to this big, enormous granite disc, which resides above where the time capsules are now buried. There's 2 time capsules because there was one from 1939-40, and then they replicated it because 64-65 was meant to be the 25th anniversary of the other fair. So there's another time capsule there as well. But the one I want to talk about is the 1939 one. It is a 7-foot long metal structure. You can see these men looking at it. It's very phallic. It's just a silver dong hanging out there.
Penetrates into the earth.
Yeah, this again, the symbolism is not subtle, right? But this time capsule, it is the first known object to be intentionally called a time capsule. And it's so funny because we're so used to them now, right? Like I'm sure people went to schools or churches or had communities that created time capsules, right? This is the first time capsule, intentional time capsule. Now, I'm obsessed with the idea of time capsules, and I think we're all creating time capsules all the time, sometimes unintentionally. A photo album is a time capsule. A box of junk we hide away in the closet for a while, that becomes a time capsule. And I'm very open to my definition of time capsules. But in terms of like an official time capsule, this 1939 one was kind of where it all began. But here's the thing. They didn't say, let's open it in 50 years or 100 years or even, 150, 200 years. They said, we're going to open this in 5,000 years. It is meant, I think I wrote it here, what it says.
The envelope for a message to the future begins an epic journey. That one. So you had
that is from the book. So they published a book because they kind of realized, you know what, people might not be able to find it. Let's publish this book and write it in a bunch of different languages, send to libraries all over the world so people can like try to find this thing. But it is meant, the thing says, should anyone discover this, let them not wantonly disturb it, but save it for those who will find it in the year 6939.
in the year 6939.
And to me, it is the ultimate American symbol for so many reasons. First of all, just like the combination of idealism and arrogance that go into that. Especially coming out of the Depression, World War II is looming. I mean, it is happening. By 1940, a lot of the pavilions that had been there in 1939 were of countries that no longer were autonomous. Poland had been taken over. Belgium. I mean, it's the geopolitical sort of part of it is really kind of fascinating of that fair. But yeah, so this time capsule, and then Kaaron, maybe you want to speak to what it's filled with.
Trash. That's my capitalist trash. It is basically because you know how I feel about this. It is, I believe, like Beetle Bailey stuff is in there. There's some bits of like Mickey Mouse, but they're all like corporate pieces of like, you really want to know the corporation, like corporate things that we were doing, the corporate detritus that we were dealing with in 39. And you're going to want to see this, you know, in 5,000 years. So.
And by the way, most of it is on microfilm, which, you know, you have to struggle to find a library now that has a microfilm machine.
When the librarian laughs at you and you're just like, microfiche? No, baby, no. So, no, I'm, it is, what you're saying about this time capsule, it sits with me a lot when I think about like how American it is, of just like, not only like the hubris of it that you're talking about, but that when we made this switch to be like a capitalist society, we thought this is the thing that you want to see. Let me rephrase that. The white men who put this together were just like, this is the thing that you want to see. So you want to know about the things that people bought, not about what they thought or how they felt or what their lives were like. You want to know what they bought, or at least what we hoped that they would buy. Because I believe some of these things were just still new. They weren't even actually like icons at that time. They were new things, and they tossed them in. It's just a waste of a time capsule, honestly.
Yeah. And of course, what Jim says, good old Jim in the Middletons, is to me hilarious, because he says, it's a complete record of our civilization. No, it's not. It is a highly incomplete, selective, racist, sexist. I mean, life with Jim. It's a limited, narrow lens of like what culture is. Like, there's not even a narrow gesture I can make to show how narrow it is. So, and then the other thing he says that I find hilarious at the very end is he says, it's the longest exhibition of the fair. It'll still be here after everything else is nothing but dust. And he's so chipper when he says it. So there is this acknowledgement that probably there's a possibility human society won't be around and this will just be an endless wasteland, but that time capsule will still be down there.
There's still Beetle Bailey down there, so we're good. I do want to make sure that we see the last slide, even though just because I like what you have to say about it. Hold on a second. Bless you.
Bless you, my child.
So yes, so this last slide, just what you have to say. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to let you say it, because I think what you have to say about it is beautiful.
So, you know, we've all encountered different kinds of time capsules, but to me, the one that I think is maybe also arrogant and idealistic, but also really beautiful and record with the sounds of. Wait, is that not the slide that's showing?
No, it is. You just
I what?
You just repeated for a second. It was really weird.
Oh.
It was like, is he having a stroke? I don't know what's happening. But you're good. You're good.
It was a message from space.
Yes.
But yeah, Voyager 1 with the golden record on it, which, you know, we can't probably have time to sort of go in depth about it, but this possibility, as Carl Sagan said, of this sort of vast cosmic ocean sending out this message in a bottle, that it someday will be some sort of touchstone for someone to whatever kind of being that might be, maybe, although it's also possible to just keep on going through space forever, but that it has these sounds of the music of the time, of a baby crying, of different places. And to me, it is the intention behind that time capsule is not as amusing, obviously, as the 1939 one, but is a beautiful thing. And I think the attempt, the desire to, like, in some way touch the future is an understandable thing. And I don't fault some of the, at least, ideas underneath the world of tomorrow and the time capsule, even though I do fault a lot of the problematic elements that came along with the individuals and groups who were the people in power that had a part of this, right? So yeah, Voyager 1, it's out there. And it's it's the farthest human-made thing, Earthling-made thing that's out there, and it's a time capsule. And that's cool.
Kurt,
not World's Fair specific.
Yes, but it is still a time capsule. And it actually encompasses things from around the world. So it's still good. So Kurt, thank you so much for coming today. I love this topic and I love you. And I'm so sorry that we're not in the same space. So I have to do the things. I know we're like tight on time, but I want to make sure that I do the things. So the things. So first off, in about an hour, so go away, get a drink, come back, will be big time. And they have Allie Hartwell today. So exciting. So exciting. Then tomorrow is a full day for Pop Culture Co-op, which, by the way, if you're not following us, I don't really understand what you're doing with your life. So you can follow us here. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram. You can do all of those things. But tomorrow at 5:00 is Into Vinit with our lovely producer, Jenna, and Bashi. So, and they will be covering the Knockaround Boys with Vin Diesel. I hear it's gonna be awesome. Then at 7:00 will be the premiere episode, hopefully, of Theater Games with Maddie. And then at 9, Trollopsism, where Cheyenne will be talking about Hustlers. Then on Sunday we have Dara. We're not quite sure what Dara's covering this week, but that's okay. It's always awesome. So we got a busy week. So if you follow us, then you'll figure out like all the stuff that we're doing. Kirk, I don't know I know that you're on the Book of Faces, but are you on any other social media that people can follow you on?
Not currently.
It's so smart of you.
Well,
smart of you.
I just don't even know what all the words are anymore. And I teach 7th graders and they say these words and I don't know what they're talking about.
Don't listen.
I should get that.
All right. So you can follow Pop Culture Co-op. You can also follow Show and Tell on Instagram. So it's Show and Tell PCC. I had to think about it, even though I made it up myself. Show and Tell PCC. You can follow me, Kaaron Trinice, on Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter, but that's just really a fool's errand for you because I don't do anything there. I think that is everything. Did I do all the things, Jenna? Awesome. Yes, I've done all the things. All right. Thank you so much, Kirk. Thank you so much to everyone out in our chat. This has been lovely. Let's go.
Fun. Thank you.